All right, so we are going to be starting with our next speakers, Mauro and Juan. So they will be talking about writing with the columnists our 100 days quest to identify a North Korean state-sponsored threat actor. Now I'll let them take over the stage.
Okay. Thanks. We are not so good, come on. Okay, welcome to our talk, Writing with the Colimas, our 100-day quest to identify a North Korean state-sponsored threat actor. My name is Mauro Eldridge, and my partner today is Juan Brodersen. This talk is divided into 3 sections. The first, we will have a really brief introduction about this talk and about ourselves, and about this mysterious word, Colima. Then we will jump into the technical analysis of this talk, which is called 100 Days in the Labyrinth, which starts telling, we will get in a minute to the details. And then a wrap-up section called Writing with the Colimas. I know that the titles are a little bit catchy, but believe me, it's worth. Let's start with a short intro. My name is Mauro Eldridge. I'm an Argentine hacker. I'm the founder of Birmingham CyberArms and DC 5411, which is the DEF CON group for Argentina and Uruguay. This is my 10th time of DEF CON, and I think it's my 5th time here at the Recon village, so I'm very happy to be here today. And my partner is Juan Brodersen. He's going to introduce himself.
Hi, well, I'm not a hacker, I'm a journalist. This is my laptop, and they were installing something here. I'm kind of frightened, but they are giving me a good headline. That is, I came to DEF CON, I make a coverage, I give a talk, and I got infected, so that's quite nice, right? So yes, Mauro is going to talk about the technical side of this malware he found, but I write in a newspaper in Argentina that is quite big, a big media outlet. And of course, because this is my first DEF CON, I watched a documentary that you all know, and there's a quote that stuck in my head that says, from the organizers, in the 101 talk, remember, the media is not your friend. And I kind of get it, because we don't have a good reputation, I know that. But my part of the talk is like try to explain or show how we told this story in a newspaper, because all of you know the technical words of these kind of things, but trying to reverse engineer this idea that we are not your friend, using your terminology, is what we will try to do together, right?
Thanks. So this concludes the introduction. We will jump into the 2 chapters. The first one, I will tell a short story on how a client got infected with something quite weird. And I found it to be a sample of malware which was really unusual, really homemade. And I still keep to my words today. I still think that it was homemade. It wasn't really something complex. And it was surprisingly simple and avoided all antivirus detections. Any vendor, you name it, it bypassed it. It was only detected by the heuristics, so by its behavioral analysis. And I started conducting some CTI and OSINT on the extracted indicators, and things started to take like a little bit twisted turn, something that I wasn't expecting. It was like the real, you know the saying, don't judge a book by the cover? Well, that was especially it. Then, when I started to suspecting that this was something a little bit bigger, I had to request certain answers, but nobody, especially companies, corporations, they do not answer, they do not reply to threat analysts, but they will reply to the journalism. That's when I say, okay, I need a journalist friend here.
That's why we are important, guys.
You see, media can be your friend or an asset, depending on. So, it took us almost 100 days. Actually, the title is 100 days, but it was 200 almost. And we decided to team up with Juan. I started asking the questions around. People had to give explanations. People had to share intel. And mostly, I knew that we heard some prides here where companies had to say, we don't have intel, we don't know, we don't have anything to say about it. And it's a little bit hard for them to recognize that part. And that was that's one of the best parts of the journalism addition here. We had some new leads at hand on this chapter, and we make a really strange wrap-up with a wonderful surprise at the end that I hope you enjoyed. So before we start, I want to make clear what's a Colima. I know that some of you already know, especially those who are from the CrowdStrike team. and some other doesn't. Let's say in simple words, a Kolima or Kianlima, it's Pegasus from the Eastern Asian culture. But on the CrowdStrike terminology, it refers to state-sponsored actors. For those who are not familiar, state-sponsored actors are threat actors that commit malicious and organized activities backed by their own state. This means basically two things. The state guarantees you eternal funding, a lot of money, and you're also immune. You have state-provided legal immunity because the state itself is asking you to commit crime. So obviously, this will lead to reckless operations, like the ones that you can see listed here. So these reckless operations are obviously do not have consequences for them, except that being reckless sometimes has certain setbacks, like a well-placed threat analyst and a well-timed journalist that just want to start asking questions around disturbing people. And so we started with this. This is the first chapter, and it's starting the things from the start. On February, on the 7th, the malware was deployed and was actually managed to be downloaded and executed on one of my clients' equipment. It was bundled inside a fake QR generator project written in Java. Actually, the project did work, did generate QR codes, but there was one of their libraries that was an implant, a Java file that was a standalone implant that started generating malicious activity. At the time, we only had the behavioral analysis. We didn't have a name, we didn't have a family, we didn't say this is Joker Spy, this is Raccoon. We didn't know what it was. So, luckily, CrowdStrike, we are not affiliated with CrowdStrike, so it's a good time to say it. CrowdStrike managed to stop it and to network contain the host. So the host will not be able to communicate without passing first through CrowdStrike. So we were able to stop it in the middle while it was happening. And the artifact had, and obviously, as most artifacts, a self-delete routine, a self-clean routine. But it wasn't able to execute because we blocked it with Falcon its ability to delete files. So we were able to seize the artifact for us. We started monitoring its behavior. We saw that nothing that we extracted at first sight was being used in another malware family, and we started extracting the IOCs. So far, this is the first thing that I wrote on my report, and I keep to my words today to be transparent and intellectually honest. I wrote that it was really simple, and for me it was homemade. It was a simple rat that attempted to open a reverse shell where the threat actor will manually connect. Nothing is automated here. It opens a shell, somebody connects in and starts popping commands at hand. At the time of writing, there were no mentions, nobody knew anything about this, so I named it QRlog because that was the name the dropper file used, qrlog.java. This is the very first report. I didn't have anything better to say about it. And to be honest, it was really simple, surprisingly simple, and I thought it was like a, like a test, like some script kiddie was trying to do some big heist, but it was like strange to be successful with such a simple malware. QRlog hides in super plain sight. The implant itself only contains a variable which says quiet zone data, nothing else, written in base 64, and its final objective, as you can see on the second picture, is executing a reverse shell. From that point onwards, everything is manual. Nothing is automated. Now, the only company that detected the sample was a Vietnamese threat intelligence company, and did not detect the malware itself. It detected the link, the Google Drive link where it was stored, but nothing else. It doesn't say this file is malicious. It just says something in the zip file is fishy. So this was the only lead we have. All the other vendors, let me go back a second, 1 over 90. All the other vendors said, no, this is fine, just run it. Now, if you analyze the code, and we will later share this, all this analysis on GitHub, you will see that some things are pretty basic, like how it tries to find the running operating system. It also has different routines to write on different hosts. You can see that the file system varies between Unix and Windows, And then it tries to create a random function while it also imports two other random libraries, random generators. So this led us to believe that it was either a copy-pasting or some GPT was involved in the middle. And finally, the C2 server is published like in plain view. It doesn't use an array of IPs, an array of different hosts to be bouncing around. It just has an URL. And these novice errors led to an interesting object file, which I will share in the end. But here's the point. To be honest, I'm from the Ruby side. I do not write Java code, so I'm not in the position to judge anyone's code, even from a student. That's when I resorted to my friend, a journalist, to ask and to find a Java expert.
So here we had the idea to talk to a programmer and give the code. This is something that gave us a quote that is interesting. Remember, I have to translate everything to a newspaper audience, right? So this idea that Maxi Friedman is a programmer and author of many books in programming, and he knows Java very well, so he told us that the malware isn't so hidden, like on a scale from 1 to 10, it's like a 3. He was guessing, and this idea of it's like if someone had made a script to hack their girlfriend was a very nice picture to like explain the situation, because in our daily basis when we talk with Mauro and send jokes and memes and that kind of things, he was telling me about this story, and that's the point when I started to guess, well, this is newsworthy. This we can translate to a general audience to understand what is happening here, right? So this was like the first step to start to check the information that Mauro was producing and see if we could come with a story, right?
A nice way to say that I don't know how to do a hello world in Java, but thanks. So I was calling it a day. Put yourself in my shoes for a minute. You have a homemade script kiddie product artifact, and you say, okay, I just upload it to see if somebody cares in the world. So I opened OTX. For those who don't know, it's the Open Thread Exchange. It's my personal favorite platform. And it shows some indicators calling it QR log. And if you can see, it's still linked to my personal GitHub, because I didn't thought that it was something big. So 2 days later, I published a write-up analyzing the code, and I made intelligence public through OTX, as I said. And up to this point, I called it a day. And for a long time, almost 2 months, nothing else happened. Around the IOCs that we were extracting, there was nothing really noticeable. There was nothing that actually caught my eye. The domains using the SSL certificate used by Let's Encrypt, like a lot of others do. This was, we did this analysis because it's historical, the host is no longer up, with Grabber App.io, which I recommend you to try. And one of both the domains were burned infra. So they were really burned, they were used a lot of time. For example, pxalgonet.org points to a vulture IP, a vulture instance, which has lots of associations with Log4j exploitation, with Cobalt Strike usage, with Joker spy activity, among others. This is just to name some. There were all sorts of, a total zoo of malware was running on that instance. And then the git-hub.me, which is the C2 server properly said, is now parked, it wasn't before, on Park1, and all traffic is now hosted on Cloudflare. And don't let the names of the name servers mislead you. They are based on Brazilian cities, for those who don't know, but the servers are in Europe, actually. But in the past, if you check previous pulses, and if you run a query on any, from a ping or wherever, you will see that the host was pointed to an Amazon AWS instance. And here's the thing. Lots of Intel platforms, like OTX, if you see it says verdict whitelisted, whitelist automatically cloud instances. This is a really bad practice, really bad. And we will see why in a minute from the very mouth of the AWS Chief Information Security Officer. But I'll be there in a minute. So I published this, and this domain was actually used by more than 500 domains and more than 100 unique TLDs. And this indicator, 2 months later, when this was a dead topic for me, I was, I don't know, breaking another thing, caught the eye of another researcher who called me on talks. This researcher called Daniel pointed to me that TC2 is part of a DPRK, Democratic People's Republic of Korea, or North Korea, infra. He told me this IP is a C2 from them. And then I needed to check this information because nobody else knew that information. Nobody else had that intel. And then was when my friend, the journalist, came again.
This is just like a strike. I went to the AWS summit in Washington. That is, I don't know if you're aware, but this summit that AWS holds every year. And when Mauro told me all of this, because I was covering for journalistic purpose, I told him, well, we gotta go for the CISO and ask about this situation. And I mean, it's, I'm sorry, where will CrowdStrike? I thought it was AWS, sorry. This one is the, I have to clear this up that I have this in a bar here. We are not affiliated with CrowdStrike, right? And drinking and that, I got this t-shirt. But Falcon, which is this system that CrowdStrike uses, detected this malicious activity and related to QRlog. And this was the time when we could check that this sample that Mauro detected was being analyzed by threat intelligence companies, right? And they connected it with Labyrinth Colima, that the words that they use is high level or high confidence, because you cannot attribute 100%. But because of the adversary's tactics, techniques, and procedures, they could connect this malware that Mauro detected with Labyrinth Colima. And this was the piece of information that Mauro wasn't able to get from them. And this was like the eureka moment, because he told me, oh, that's the name I put it to the malware. So yes, we have this story, right?
Yeah, they were using my name and they didn't want to provide me the intel. I should have sued for copyright. YouTube doesn't have this problem, you know? Okay, let's get serious. So that's my conversation with Utox user, because here the mystery remains untouched. And I was telling him, you actually left me frozen. I wasn't aware I was playing with a DPR key sample. And you can see here the Intel diagram from CrowdStrike, which attributes both domains to Labyrinth Colima, again with high confidence. Now, we were playing with a sample from a state-sponsored actor. And what's the first thing a responsibility threat analyst will do? We started playing with the C2, crafting messages to it, trying to interact with it. And one thing led to another. I'm not the smartest person in the room. For merely journalistic purposes, we started messaging the C2 with crafted payloads, requesting them to chat with us, to have an interview with us, and sharing our Telegram alias. And obviously, they were not really friendly about it. And during a couple of days, Kim boys were trying to brute force our SSH servers from the machine where we tried to establish the connection. But unbeknownst to them, since we are always one step ahead of the Kim boys, that machine was disposable and was full of honeypots. So all they tried, which was 1,500 of attempts, was logged by me and by my honeypot. So this provided us with a lot of intel again. So somebody's going to die on the DPRK, I know. I can't sleep thinking about it, man. So, hacking comedy night tonight. Okay, what caught my eye here is that both the domains and the IP addresses were scattered all around the world, even on my country, Argentina, on Uruguay, Peru, India, you name it. They were all across, and not all of them were exactly burned infra. Some of them had a good reputation. Yeah, I took the time to check everyone. I'm not a really fan at Paris. And most of them belonged to reputable VPS providers, once again including Amazon. So this is where my friend, the journalist, enters again and say, let's pick on that guy, the Chief Information Security Officer from Amazon.
So as I was telling you before, yes, Mark Rayland, who is the CISO, I got the chance to talk with him in DC. He was totally aware of this situation, and I'm quoting here. He said, we are aware that the hackers are willing to pay for AWS, and the explanation is simple. He said someone who sends spam, for example, can pay a low amount to have a Linux server and send a million phishing emails, right? I think this would be a problem that not only AWS has, of course, other platforms too, like Azure and Oracle and those companies. But he acknowledged to be, and I'm quoting, that we are very concerned about spam coming from the platform because, of course, it lowers our reputation, it causes problems for legit users that try to connect, because it can send emails, logically. And he also pointed that they have identified that there are more sophisticated actors that conduct this kind of abuse of the platform, right?
A minute. Amazon said that they will no longer sponsor us.
Yes.
Okay, so you are now, we now started to think, these guys use undetectable samples, even if they look like toys, distributed botnets, and they are really short fuse with us. But who are the heads, the brains, the masterminds behind these operations? A quick note, I will share all these indicators too in the GitHub repository, don't worry. So this led us to the wrap-up section, to try to profile a little bit what's happening on behind the scenes, behind the code, behind the malware, behind the IOCs. Let me share with you a short, once again based on CrowdStrike, which definitely is not paying us, a state-sponsored threat landscape from the DPRK. We have two groups that seem to not be exactly tied. They are state-sponsored, but not exactly tied to an organization, ministry, secretariat, whatever you call it in your country, that are Velvet Colima, which are dedicated to US and Republic of Korea, South Korea obviously, critical infra, NGOs, government, media, military, the Ricochet Colima, which are based especially on Republic of Korea operations against government, media, and also DPRK defectors, but we don't have a lot of intel on that part, which is the most interesting part actually. And then we have the DPRK RGB, which is the Reconnaissance General Bureau, which contains the Bureau 121 and 180, which are mostly commonly known by APT38, Sync, Hidden Cobra, the Beagle Boys, or the infamous Lazarus.
So here we started to gather information. This is kind of well-known information because Lazarus is like the most famous group that Mauro named, but in order to write a news story, we have to tell the public and remember who is Lazarus and what they're famous for. So we started gathering quotes from researchers, and this one is from ESET, Latin America. And well, it's something that maybe all of you know, that is a highly sophisticated cyber criminal group that targets high-profile cyber attacks, and that they are linked to North Korea, but this is like something very interesting that they've been active for more than 20 years, right?
And then inside Lazarus, we have three divisions. Once again, remember that all this is like kind of black box intelligence, let's call it, to give it a name. You don't know for sure because you do not work for the DPRK. I promise, I don't work for them. And since you don't work for them, you are seeing things from the outside, from outside the window. So sometimes assets or group may be, let's say, a little bit elastic and work for one or another. They sometimes share infrastructure, they sometimes share the same arsenals or reuse infra from past operations. So remember that these have to be taken with a grain of salt. We have Silent Colima, we are dedicated to high-profile corporate and economic espionage. Stardust Colima, which are mostly focused on high-profile heist, especially for cryptocurrency and in the past for the banking system. And the Labyrinth Colima, which are more generalist and broader group, dedicated to currency theft and corporate espionage, but even on lower levels, not only high profile. They are the responsible for QR log. This is what CrowdStrike have to say about them.
Yes, what's interesting about this slide is that Sony incident, WannaCry are those cases that actually hit headlines, right? That were in the newspapers. They like jumped the niche of cybersecurity, right? So, speaking to CrowdStrike, they assessed that they are linked to the Bureau 121 of the RGB, and they're conducting espionage actions and revenue generation schemes, and that they do intelligence gathering, but also a financial gain. That is what interests us the most, because this QR was designed to extract or rob yes, currency, money, and destruction and intellectual property theft. So with these quotes, we started like to, in the article, to make the context, right? To remember the audience what all of this means. And as I was saying, the Sony picture attacks was very well known because they leaked movies that weren't released, right? And that was something that hit very heavy on the headlines, right? And the other piece of information that we used as context was the AstraZeneca case that they did spear phishing to try to steal intellectual property. They didn't succeed in the attack, but it was in the headlines also, right? So with all of this, there was a CrowdStrike report, not the quotes that they gave us to me, but there was a previous report about Labyrinth Colima that says that the stolen assets that we are describing are, I'm quoting, likely funding an array of state projects, including their nuclear and weapon of massive destruction programs. And it's like sounds kind of crazy, right? But we started gathering, I started gathering information about this, and there is a quote on Kim Jong-un, the North Korean leader. I think we're gonna have to cancel the trip to North Korea after this. Yes, yes, yes. Does it go online or the talk or? But there's a quote that is very interesting, again, for a general audience, that says that cyber warfare is an all-purpose sword that guarantees that North Korean people's armed force ruthless striking capabilities along with nuclear weapons and missiles. So the Kim himself is kind of giving us some hints about this piece of information. Actually, the Treasury of the United States took action against North Korean hacking groups because they identified that they were perpetrating cyber attacks to support these missile programs, right?
So, as you may know, they are organizing as an APT in order to steal currency, primarily from banks. Now they are moving into the crypto world to finance a ballistic program. That's no small deal. But sometimes, and this is the wonderful surprise I have for you, sometimes these large organizations like the APTs, government, agencies, secretariats, whatever you call it, have a little bit of a hard time managing their assets, both the technological and the human ones. Sometimes OPSEC fails happen, like this one. On the sample that I have collected, that I had seized, the file input files.lst, for all those who use Java and Maven, you maybe already know what's going to happen, contains Maven build information. So based on it, it's possible to ascertain that the author of the malware operates on Windows, and it's called Edward. So, Edward, I know what you did there. You did it right using Western technology, you traitor of the DPRK. So let's do a quick wrap-up about this talk, and we will jump to our conclusions, which are more like tips on lessons learned, as you want to call it.
So the idea is how to make a headline out of this. I know this is Spanish, but it's saying made in North Korea. They found a virus that works like a digital Molotov. And I know you don't like these headlines, guys, but how do you explain to someone that there is a malware that is shitty written, sorry, but as Mauro says, it's not well written, it's like something that it's not professional, but it's effective. It's not detected by the heuristics and that kind of thing. So I write for a newspaper that has like this number of print units every day, and these subscriptions, and that's the average age of the readers, so that's something you have to consider. And the big question is, how do we tell the story to my mother, my girlfriend, my sister, my friends? Because that's the whole point of it. You hackers are providing incredible, useful insights. And there is, in Argentina at least, I know, like, for example, here in the States, you have lots of good people that are covering this beat, and it's amazing that that's happened, but in Argentina, we don't have that tradition. I mean, we don't have the InfoSec beat covered, right? So when I try to write this down, I try to think in these three keys, right? First, to translate. You all know, or some of you know, what a RAT is, what an IOC is, what an APT is. I know all of this because I talked to him, right? And after talking to him, I started reading and I started researching and gathering information and reading reports from a lot of companies that does Intel, not only CrowdStrike, but also Checkpoint, ESET, Palo Alto. All of those companies makes very insightful reports that are very useful. And the challenge is to translate all of this, right? When we were talking about the RAT, he was saying it's like if the attacker is in front of your computer without being there. Well, that's a good explanation, right? So a malware, it's a virus. I mean, you could kill me because of this, but in order to explain this to a general audience, you have to make some sacrifices. Then in the article, when you are writing, okay, you can use parentheses, commas, and make explanation. There's no problem with that, respecting the journalistic guidelines, right? But this is work we have to do in the media. We have to asset this kind of work, right? The second key aspect to me is to give voice to specialists, to hackers, to investigators, to researchers. So that's why we got in touch with a hacker expert, a malware analyst, and a threat analysis and these kind of things. And the other pillar to me is to explain to the audience why this is important. Why does this matter, right? So one thing we were talking not only with Mauro but other Argentine hackers here is that this is like the most asked question. When I came here and I started saying in my circles, I'm going to DEF CON. Oh, what is DEF CON? No, a hacker convention. They told me, what? There's a hacker convention? Is that even legal? Yes, and it's a problem because I know all of you are very familiarized with this problem, but I think the point is to understand that this question on the left is no useful. I mean, why people keeps asking this question? So I think that the journalistic challenge is to shift that question towards how is this intel that you guys are providing changing the information about the world and how we know it? Because the global landscape is changing, and it's changing really, really fast, right? So the whole point of publishing these stories that, believe me, I have the freedom to publish like anything in my beat, in my section, in my newspaper. Problem is, you don't get many users, clicks, and that kind of things, right? So that's why you have to make a headline like that with a Molotov and that kind of things to catch the eye and then explain like the technical things and try to translate. But for me, the most important thing of the Mauro's investigation was that we could carry out that to a media outlet that is huge and is not used to treat these topics, right? So I would, like I was telling Mauro, change thinking that this question is the question that you guys are answering, right? And that deserves a spot in the media and someone that can translate that kind of language, right?
And now your grandma fears Kim Jong-un. So, cool. So our conclusions or lesson learned from things is that any suspicious activity you find, even the smaller one, regardless of its scale, should be investigated to the last consequences. I got a lot of people telling me to drop it off, it was not worth it, and I only stopped investigating it when I thought myself that it wasn't worth it. But some people, even from minute zero, say, no, it's not worth it. Allow it to pass. And you don't do it, especially those folks that work in SOCs. You know that you don't let almost anything pass. You have to be wary of almost anything. Also, always share the intel. If I wasn't in the first place sharing the intel, even if I thought that it wasn't worth it, I would have never known that I was playing with a DPRK sample. And always ask the questions. Maybe you can find someone who is asking the same question as you or that has the answer. And media sometimes can be your friend or an asset. And if you want to check the QR log technical analysis and all the IOCs, I'm going to publish the repository in 5 minutes. I was just finished cleaning it up. I want to be honest, I still haven't finished it. It is there. I moved it from my company, Handler, not on Mauro Eldridge. And also, if you want to see, again, as he says, Labyrinth Colima tends to hit the headlines. The story was covered on Clarín, Argentina's top newspaper, so you have the link there. We will also share the slides in case you want to copy the link on a more comfortable way. And we need to recognize the help from a lot of people who, without them, this talk won't be possible. Maxi Firman for aiding with the sample analysis, Daniel, Merlo, CrowdStrike, AWS, and Nested for their insight, and my folks at the DC 5411 and Birmingham CyberArms. I think I'm not forgetting anyone. Oh, and Edward for providing the sample and giving us one of the most enjoyable jobs we ever done. Thank you. You have been an amazing partner.